Hi guys, welcome to the latest podcast of YarninBlak. Today I've got a really special friend of mine, Aunty Marjorie Thorpe, joining us. But before I introduce her, I just would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that I'm currently calling you from. I'm here in Baldwin Q on the land of the Wurundjeri people, and I pay respect to elders past, present, and emerging. And I welcome any Aboriginal person here today and to those listening to us. So, Aunty Marge, how are you going, my dear friend?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm fine. Nice to see you. For
You
people who
too.
don't know who you are, tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're from.
I'm Marjorie Thorpe, probably known by Margie Thorpe, and to my friends. So I'm currently living at Lake Tyers Aboriginal Trust, which is on Gunnaikurnai country, East Gippsland, close to Lake's entrance. Well, it's actually where I live on Lake Tyers. So that's where I've been living and been involved with for the last 30 years, on and off, living here, but certainly pretty well connected. I was born in the Latrobe Valley in a town called Yallourn, a mining town, and my childhood I grew up there. So essentially I'm born in Gippsland and probably end up here. And I spent some time living in Melbourne where my children were all born, 3 children.
And you come from a pioneer family of radical activists as well. Your mum, who's still around, and
Yes.
I'm not sure.
She'll be 89 on Sunday. It's her birthday.
Aunty Alma.
So we're all heading a big family gathering at Darty Munwarrow, as you probably know that place.
Yes.
So all of the clan will be coming with all friends and extended families to celebrate her 89th birthday. Yes, looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Any surprises for her that you got planned?
You can't surprise her. No, it's a big, she's looking forward to it. And, I think she might get a few surprises as in presents, but she's really happy to, have her family around her, which you can imagine is a fairly big family, going down to great-great-grandchildren now. So there'll be a few of those around, actually adults and babies, but, yeah, a fairly big family she has. Yeah, so her and her sister Carol are the two remaining siblings of her family, and she was born and raised in Fitzroy, and her mother came to Fitzroy from Framingham Aboriginal community. Her name is Edna Brown, and she was forced off Framingham Mission under the Half Caste Act and in the time. So as a 15-year-old, she was forced off Framingham and came to work in Melbourne like many people did, working as a domestic and working as kitchen hands when she came to Melbourne. She lived in Fitzroy and my mother was born in Carlton, so she essentially spent most of her young life there, as many Aboriginal people did at that time.
Now, where did you grow up? Where did you grow up in primary school? Where did you do primary school?
At Yallourn Primary School, and high school to year 10 now, used to be Form 4. And then I was sent to boarding school at Methodist Ladies College in Kew, and that was part of another policy of that time where a lot of people my age were actually sent to boarding school. So you'll find that happened across the country where people were sent along there. So, and I had to do Form 4 again, and I actually dropped out of there I dropped out in the middle of Form 5, which is year 11, because I had enough. Yeah.
So while you were at school, how much Aboriginal studies did you learn at school?
Well, we're talking about, can't remember when I started school. I started school at 5 or 6. Can't remember. We didn't have prep in those days, so it would have been straight into grade 1.
Yeah.
No, absolutely not. There was nothing like that. And in fact, I was just contacted by somebody who went to primary school with me, and she made a comment of how badly I was treated by the teachers. She was actually She's actually a friend of Alice's, my younger brother, and she there was a Facebook thing, and I made a comment, and so I got feedback from some people from Yallourn from that time. I'm still friends with the people I went to high school, and some of them I started from the time I started primary school and lived in the neighbourhood. I still am friends with a couple of those people today. Yeah, but there was nothing spoken about Aboriginal people at that time. In fact, we did have some children who came to the school who had been adopted by a couple of white families and so we were the only Aboriginal kids in the school, with the exception of those children who had been placed in care with some of the families in that town.
Yeah. Do you think it's changed a lot? Do you think younger kids these days are being taught more about Aboriginal issues?
Well, I think it depends on what school they go to, and I think that also depends then again on what the involvement of the community is that they live in, and I think that varies from community to community. My 3 grandchildren have done their primary. Oh no, the 2 older ones did their primary education at Lakes Entrance Primary School, and the 3rd grandchild is doing his education at Thornbury Primary School, which I think is probably one of the best examples of cultural immersion by the whole school in Aboriginal culture. So I think that's just an amazing school that many could take a leaf from their book. So they are. I know a lot of Aboriginal parents still, would like to send their kids to that school if they could, and it all depends on where you live now, where you can go. So my young grandson's in grade 5, and it's an amazing environment. He just loves school. He doesn't want to miss one day of school. So that's all you want children, like we did when we grew up. We loved school. We didn't miss a day because we loved it. And so when you see a child who just loves school and is involved and got lots of friends, not across the different cultures, because that's multicultural, that school as well. But, very popular boy he is always invited to the parties. So at 10 years old, he's very confident and doing very well as a result of that. Yeah, I think that's, I think it depends on, the committees in the schools and the Aboriginal committees, whoever they are, and ensuring that the whole school, I don't know if you've been there, you have, so you know what I'm talking about as far as, visually, artistically and culturally, it's, that's always, that is front and centre, and I think that's really important.
Now, after school, you ended up working in a number of different jobs in a number of different areas. But what was one of your first jobs that you got?
Well, aside from trying to work in a biscuit factory in Richmond when I'd had Lidia, like we were poor, unmarried mother. So, I think that was actually before I had Lidia. And I lasted to morning tea time and just thought I couldn't do it. I couldn't stand the smell of the biscuits, and then they served up biscuits for morning tea, and I just had to run out of there because I couldn't stand the smell. And I worked in a fruit shop in Lygon Street and a waitress in the city at a restaurant in the city, which I enjoyed. My earliest job, so sort of those kind of jobs as you do when you're young. And before I had Lidia, of course. But one of the first jobs was with the Ministry for Aboriginal Affairs in the day, where I worked in the printing section. And as a young woman, and I wasn't my responsibility. I was 18, so that was working. That was one of my first jobs in that sense of a full-time job. Yes.
Yeah.
So at that time, of course, I had Lidia when I was 19 years of age, and at the Women's Hospital in the day when, you know, the protection forces were full on and I was unmarried at the time. So I had, you know, pressure at that time in the labour ward to force me to adopt her out. And after that, I mean, you're treated pretty badly because you were an unmarried person with a child, and particularly an Aboriginal woman. So that was just a shocking experience to have to go through that after, you know, giving birth as a 19-year-old and not knowing, you know, that was traumatic enough, let alone having to be subjected to that. Even in my pregnancy with her, I went to a place called a Carlton Clinic because I lived in the Carlton Flats with my auntie. After I left boarding school, I came to Carlton. I lived with my auntie, and she lived in the Carlton Flats. So that was my, you know, in my later teenagers, I actually, you know, I was one of those kids who hung around the Carlton Flats and loved life. So, yes, in that time, so when I went to the Carlton Clinic, the continual force was, you know, when I was pregnant, was obviously the Carlton Clinic was a place where it was a time when abortions were easy to get and there was no problems, early 70s, and that's not what I wanted to do. I you know, I resisted that. I'd made my mind up. I wanted to have a baby, and that's what I did. So Lydia's father is the famous Roy, who was on TV talking about his daughter. We met at 16 years of age at Carlton Flats. I didn't want to get married at 18. He was an apprentice carpenter. And we eventually got married when I was 23, and Lydia was our flower girl at 4 years of age. So, yeah, and so his family lived at the Carlton Flats as well. So we lived in different places around Melbourne and eventually moved to Queensland, which I didn't like. I couldn't cope with it. It was out of my environment, and I actually, that's when we separated, and I came back to Melbourne and started working in different Aboriginal organisations. I actually, when I was pregnant, is when I started working at the Aboriginal Legal Service when it just set up in Gertrude Street, and I was the receptionist, pregnant with Lidia, and then once I had Lidia, you know, obviously had time home, and well, not long because, you know, daycare centres were all the go in those early 70s. So she went to Carlton Creche, and I went to work as, you know, as I said, at the Aboriginal Legal Service, and then I had a few jobs at the legal services over the years at that time. I started as a receptionist. I was a bookkeeper for the legal service in those days, a field officer, a law clerk, and a legal secretary. Wow. So, yes, so I thought I was pretty good being a legal secretary. That was when you had to have the phones over your ears and you just typed the briefs up for the lawyers So there were a few young women, Aboriginal women at my age working there that I, you know, still around the community. So Janice Muir was one, and Colleen Harney was another one. So, yeah, we go back to those days in the typing pool, which was great fun. But it was hard work. Yeah.
So how did you move into community services areas? Because I know you did a lot of work with mental health as well.
Oh, yes. Well, I guess I'd done my apprenticeship basically, you know, like working in I worked for I actually also worked in those roles in the Aboriginal Health Service as bookkeeper, and then the admin assistant. So I had a knowledge setting up filing systems, setting up systems. I guess that was my basic knowledge of high school, you know, learning in those areas. So I put that skill to work, and I wasn't great or anything. I just knew how to do it, kind of thing. So I started working there as the assistant administrator, and I actually was a field officer, one of the first field officers of the day. And my areas were Lake Tyers as a young woman, coming here. They weren't health workers and then, but essentially we were the people who, you would call them today kind of engagement people, engagement officers. So my area was Gippsland, of course, because that's my father's country, Gunnaikurnai country here. And I was born and raised in the valley and had family all through here. So coming to Lake Tyers and going to Morwell and Bairnsdale. Bairnsdale had the women's group who were, working in that area. And one of the catalysts actually for the setting up of the health service was a scabies outbreak at Lake Tyers. And so that was a big deal in the day. Welfare and health were sort of pretty much closely connected. And so, but just connecting with people in those communities. So that was my job. I love that. A driver at the health service and bringing people. So eventually I stepped up the ladder a bit and became a health worker and worked with patients. It was engagement in those days. People didn't want to go to a doctor. They were terrified of going to hospital, as is Fitzroy, because generally when people went to hospital, they didn't come out because their situations were pretty grim and they were pretty sick and a lot of them died. So that was the fear in those days, and particularly in Fitzroy. I had an uncle that, he used to go to hospital seriously ill. And then as soon as he woke up and realised where he was, he just ripped the needles out of his arms and ran away, back to the lanes because they were frightened. So I worked with those people. I worked with the people in the lane, the men in the lanes, and helping them go to Centrelink and so Charcoal Lane and all the others. That was because I knew them. They were my relatives who'd come to Fitzroy in those days, and they were, men and women who hadn't, and obviously people who came trying to look for their families. So a lot of those people were in the streets, and Melbourne was the place, and Fitzroy was the place where people came to find their families. Then I went on, and then I as the assistant administrator in the Aboriginal Health Service, I was there was a job of the assistant program director of VACA, and I worked as a program director there, and under Graham Atkinson, and Molly Dyer was the original person who set up that agency. It was Molly Dyer's life work, and so I went there as an assistant, the secretary basically. And when Graham left there, I took on the role as the program director, and that was the formation days of VACA, and also definitely the formation days of Snake. So I was the national coordinator of Snake. Molly Dye set that up, and I actually was involved in this, helping and because VACA was a bigger organisation, helping other childcare agencies around the country get established and supporting them and developing the policies that came out of those days.
Where was VACA first set up? Because I only know VACA from about 1998, 99, when it was one office behind Hungry Jack's on High Street.
Oh, yes.
Where was it before then?
It was originally, there used to be a pub on the corner, I can't remember it. It was on the corner of Brunswick Street and Victoria Parade. There was a 3-story building just next to that hotel, and it was right across the road from where Catholic University is today in Brunswick Street, the beginning of Brunswick Street. That was a massive building, 3 stories, and we fitted into those 3 stories, and it became. And then it moved to somewhere, I can't exact, North Fitzroy, when we had to move to a bigger place. Yeah. And then I sort of lost track of it pretty much after that. I can't remember. I don't know where they went to then, whether it was Preston, but I think they stayed there for a while as well. So, yeah, there were a few places before that place I think it's in Bell Street. It's a big VACA building, isn't it?
Yeah, now, yeah.
When I first seen that, I was amazed. Yeah, so it was mixed, I guess how I got involved in mental health. I actually, as a health worker, becoming a health worker, I was also, as I said, getting people to engage. It was a lot of people had, serious, well, not necessarily serious, but mental health issues. And again, it was my job to transport people who, from their homes to the doctors. And that was a time when I remember Dr. Jane McKendrick was a student doctor at that time. She started in Fitzroy at the Aboriginal Health Service around that time. And she realised, that there was a need for mental health, and she went back to study and became a psychiatrist and got involved with the health service. And I'd always been close working with her when she was a medical student. She was working at the health service as a medical student, and then as a doctor, and then as a psychiatrist, and all that time. She's the same age as me, actually. She's a year younger than me. So we got along pretty well. And so I worked with her in, as before that, even transporting, as I said, patients who needed to come and see. It was the introduction of bringing a psychiatrist into the health service. It was a pretty terrifying experience for people in those days, because no one was going to go and see. So we were all terrified of the psychiatrist, because that meant we were crazy if we went to see a psychiatrist. That was just, we all thought that, including myself. So it was a real fear of, it was the fear of going to doctors, let alone going to a psychiatrist as a specialist. Like the fear of people going to the doctors, one thing is they were pretty ill. They were suffering from a lot of illnesses, and diabetes was, one of the big ones that I can remember. I remember picking up a very elderly woman from Druin. She lived in like a paddock in Druin. And she had, to bring her to the health service of Fitzroy to get the bandages changed on her legs, because she was, So that's the kind of work I did in that area, and worked as a health worker, learning before it was actually called Koori College, and health workers became that what they are. And so I sort of progressed into the role of the mental health worker, the crazy health worker, but my role was the mental health worker. So, and it was introducing was engagement. Now I understand, because I, understand obviously what engagement is about. That's really what it was about, to reassuring people that it would be okay, it'd be okay, but it'd be a good idea for them to go and get some help for their, for their illnesses. So people were afraid to go to hospitals, and the reason, even I remember as a child, you always had to make sure you had clean knickers on. That was I don't think it was just a black thing. Everyone just, because that was a big thing you had to worry about when you're going to doctors. Your underwear was clean, because it was, So that involvement with Jane and working with Jane in that time was, I'd come back to the health service after. I can't remember. I was actually, I think, involved in the transition from the health service in 229 Gertrude Street to a bigger building, which was the old VD clinic, which it was my job to actually get that. We didn't have much money, so to get it fixed up and make it look like a health service inside, and that became the Aboriginal Health Service, where I worked with Dr. McKendrick on research, got involved with research, and done that first study that we did of an Aboriginal community, and looked at the study that we did at that time, and it was the first of its studies, that was done. Yeah.
Growing up, did you have any role models yourself? Who were they?
My grandmother. So I'm the oldest grandchild, and my grandmother was just, when I went to boarding school, I was a boarder, and you were only allowed out on Saturdays from 8 to 8. And I only went to my grandmother's place, and I refused. They wanted to send her out to have tea with, people who wanted to take an Aboriginal kid out. Yeah. And there's no way I was going to do any of that. I always went to my grandmother. I was out of that door at 8 o'clock, and I used to cry when I had to get back by 8. And she used to make sure she got me back at 8. But in the meantime, she would get ready to go to the builders at 6 o'clock. That was her ritual on Saturday, the time that she got ready. And as soon as she started getting ready to go to the builders, when I'd start getting depressed, so she'd have to take me there first to the builders with her, and then sort of get me back to queue on time. So she was my role model, without a doubt. Yeah.
There's big words that get thrown around a lot, and one of them is reconciliation. What's reconciliation mean to you?
I guess being a member of the Reconciliation Council is when I really had to think about that, and I wasn't really in agreement with what the definition meant. But I think it was the intent for the Reconciliation Council was to actually engage, again is the word, consult and inform people about the issues that we needed to address if we wanted to resolve the differences within this country. So, so it doesn't have, it's really a word that is a useless word. I mean, we never had a relationship in the first place, so how the word is an oxymoron, because, you reconcile if you had a relationship in the first time, unless you're reconciling the books, which is another term for it in accounting. Yeah. So it's an oxymoron, actually, and I think it's probably the softest word that could have been found by the government at the time. Yeah. I had issues with it when I became a council member. Not really, because the work was important. It was important. I actually was 6 years on the council, the second of the 3 years, the second and third year. So I was there. I was appointed by the Labor government, and I was reappointed by the Liberal government. So I was one of the few people that survived the two terms. Yeah. And in the second term, I became the chair of the People's Movement, which was, I had there was a committee, People's Movement Committee, that I chaired, and they were mainly people who were the elders on the committee and the older people. I was fairly young myself, and
young, you know that.
Hey,
I said you're still young.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so I am. When my mother's 89, yes, I am.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, so that was an amazing experience, and I was involved in, so it was my role to be our committee's role to do the organisation of the walks across the bridge and the walks in Melbourne. So it was those sorts of things, setting up the big constitutions. The content was done by other committees, essentially. Yeah. And I was on the executive on the second term as well.
So the other word that gets thrown around quite lightly is cultural safety.
Oh, my favourite. The favourite thing I hate to hate. I love to hate.
Yeah. What things make you feel culturally safe when you go to an organisation?
The person who greets you at the door, not what's on the walls. It's how you feel when you go into a place. And, we can feel the atmosphere, whether a place that's a safe place for me. When I go into a place and I don't feel the hair on my neck stand up, or I don't feel some sense of being uncomfortable. And I think, it doesn't matter how many show bags I get or how many posters, that doesn't make me feel safe. In fact, that makes me feel a bit wary what am I being sold here that they think I need? I don't know. I guess that's my, in the latest, I guess the latest term where that was used when Senator McCartney said that she felt culturally unsafe. And when I realised what that was about, I thought, that's an inappropriate use of that term. And I think it's a construct that's just meant, I don't know, it's just an oxymoron, another one. It just doesn't make sense to me. It's just words. And I think there's better words that you can use than that to explain how you would feel when you went anywhere. And I don't know. I don't know how to even explain it. It's an irritating term, and I don't know how and who sets the definition of that, and how do the boundaries get set in that sense as well, because it's an individual thing, and one size doesn't fit all.
And then how do you measure it?
Well, good point. You'd have to review all of how people felt. And as I said, I think there's far too much money being spent on the paraphernalia, and I'm really a bit critical of it. It's really, and I'm sick of show bags. I'm sick of all this rubbish that they want to give you. And I think even more so lately, I'm thinking, how much did that cost? How much does it cost to produce useless pieces of information? And even you go to some people's places, they've got all these bags, show bags, that are on the floor. You're not going to carry them around. And some of the stuff that I think it's a waste of money, actually. And
What stereotypes about Aboriginal people would you still like to change? Because I know the stereotypes are still out there. We get to see them more. We get to hear them as soon as there's some Indigenous issue being broadcast. We start seeing the comments. We start seeing the social media. But there are still a lot of stereotypes. What would you like to break?
I think, our fight, our struggle for recognition, people who are fairer and who don't fit the definition or the perception of what an Aborigine looks like, that makes me wild, because I think that, that's racism, and also about, why do we need more land? It was our fault that, that we were in the we were primitive and we didn't deserve anything anyway. So people came here to improve the land and, have a better lifestyle, and they disregarded our culture and our connection to the land, to their detriment these days. So you see a little bit of a shift there. But it's in the sense of, what right do you think you have got to the land? You were conquered. You were, there's none of you left anymore. So those stereotypes are racist, and they're inflammatory. The discrimination and the racism is also, distorted in itself. Racism is a very specific term, and it's not just, it's being prejudiced, but it's also having the power to back up that prejudice. So it's, you can't just fling being racist around, because people are racist and they don't even know what they're talking about, the individual. The racism that really worries me is the racism that emanates out of institutions that actually, that's what they do. They've got the backup to enforce that discrimination and prejudice. That's racism. And I think people need to be very, I was also involved in racism awareness workshops with groups, welfare, social workers, all sorts of different people. And I did that with Action for World Development, used to support the Aboriginal Health Service in the day. So we learnt how to do those workshops in racism racism awareness workshops, which is really what needs to be taught today.
Yeah.
You know, it's about racism. It's about discrimination, but racism being, you know, which is an institutional thing. It's about the institutionalised racism against our Aboriginal people or anybody that that is racism. People can be prejudiced and all the rest of it, but they're not. It's not necessarily racist because they don't have the power through the media or anything else to make that reinforced. You know, the media is racist, the government is racist. There's racist policies, and that's where the racism is the problem, because that's where it really is ingrained in this society.
And it's been ingrained because the policies were created in a way of getting rid of Aboriginality in the past.
Well, yes. The terminology, as you know, the different descriptions of us is, you know, as being Aborigines. Then we actually push to have an adjective, which is the word Aboriginal, because of the stigma of us being called Aborigines, and certainly with the you know, with the 67 referendum, it was about, you know, yes for the Aborigines, but the word Abo also is a very sort of terrible word to, you know, and I know, you know, it's terrible to be called Abos. To be called Abos is really a derogatory thing to call anybody out, you know, who are our people. And, you know, I had kids, you know, being called an Aboriginal bum cleaner at school when they were going to school, and it was and Abos, and we used to get called Abos too when we were kids, but we didn't even know what that was when we went to school, and we'd run home and ask our mum and dad what that was. You know, we didn't hear that. But when you go to the cities, and because we weren't really the only Aboriginal family in that town, and so we understood as we grew up. We were shocked, actually, that how people, and not to say that we didn't suffer racism, but it was really mainly from the teachers that I suffered racism at school and when I was living in York, from the teachers.
Yeah.
Mm.
Do you think those teachers would have actually got the fact that they were being racist?
I don't know, but that's a good question. I think that I wonder, but you know, my friend that I can't even remember her, in primary school, you know, I was beaten up by a teacher, flogged by a teacher with a cane, a feather duster cane, and to the point I think I was in grade 5, and it was in sewing, and because I was picking a wart on my hand and wasn't listening or probably talking or something, I had to stand up the front and actually get whipped across the legs. And, you know, I actually, you know, I was pretty bad, and I walked home, and you know, but my parents couldn't go and confront they didn't ever come to school and confront the teachers. That just wasn't done in those days. You just had to, you know, behave, kind of thing. And that, I'll never forget that. That was pretty serious. And actually that's when this person contacted me. She said, "You were treated terrible." They were shocked the way I was. This is only fairly recently, and actually made me feel a bit depressed, actually. I was thinking, oh, geez, you know. But yes, I remember, you know, the thing was when I was, because I'm a left-hander, I'm pretty left-handed everything I do. In grade 1, I was stood up in front of the class and made to catch the ball in my right hand, and got into trouble for using my right hand. So, you know, sort of just things that you didn't, you know, it wasn't, but so I don't know. And there were no other kids were treated like that. So you'd have to think when you reflect back on that. Yes, it was. Yes, they knew, or they didn't. And in high school, my high school friends, you know, I was picked on a fair bit. I used to get sent up to the headmasters and get the strap. What not? And it wasn't because I was doing it, because I was maybe talking to someone, or, you know, it's just for not serious infringements. So, yeah, it makes you just think that. So I think another thing that I recognise, and a lot of people will say the same thing, is when the $3 checks come out from the education department, we thought we were pretty rich when that happened, but the school didn't like it, and the other kids in the school didn't like it as well, because that was special treatment in a sense. Yeah. So yes, they were, and I think there was racism, and we didn't understand that ourselves. We were naive to that, but then on reflection, yeah, it was. And even the neighbours, you know, not really, but, you know, I went to the high school reunion, you hear some of the things say, some of the things you think, I'm not going back to the high school reunions anymore, you know. So, yeah.
There's a lot of young Aboriginal people that don't know much about culture, but are wanting to know more. Where would you suggest they start looking?
Good question. For those, if they don't have family who know, you know, about culture, then they're at a real disadvantage. Where do you go to, you know, because that's from what culture is about. It's about family and belonging, and having a place where you belong to. But that can be also that could also, I mean, what is culture? First of all, you've got to define, what does culture mean, you know? And I think there is so there's all different levels of culture as well. And I think to start off with, and, you know, I've seen people find, first of all, who they are. And I think that's the most important thing, to find out where you come from. You know, what area where do my people actually originate from? And so if you know that, then you can go back to that country and just be and just feel. You can, you know, you can feel comfort in that, you know, where you actually come from. You know, that in the whole world, this is where I come from. And you know, and that comes with that. If you come from that, then that's where you're going to feel, you know, good. So that's the, what do they call that? That's the intangible stuff.
Yeah. But
the tangible stuff is for, you know, going back to these schools. And I have to say, and I think the Willem as a daycare centre, you know, that's all about that. First, when the kids, have you been there?
I've been there, yes.
So first of all, when you walk in there, the kids have to find out where they come from on the big map, and they put their mark on the map. And, you know, these are childcare kids, kids. And I've been there a few times, and it's just the most amazing feeling for anybody to go there and see them kids. They do a welcome to country. They actually march out, and the kids are doing the clapsticks, and they're so proud, and they understand what a welcome to country is, or acknowledgement to country. I don't know what, you know, because there's difference, but it's the same. It's about a ceremony, and that's what they do at the start of, you know, the week. And to see them little kids go to that, I mean, that is just an amazing thing to see, and how the confidence in them kids to do that, and to have their smoking ceremony. They do a smoking ceremony, and to see the kids feel so confident in doing that is it's just a beautiful thing. Professor Fiona Stanley, who's the expert in child health, you know, she's got an Order of Australia for that. And we got her, she went out there, and she just said there should be a boop in everywhere. So young children, from the time they're developing their sense of identity, who they are, then they can, if you've got that kind of environment, because it's not just about putting the flag up and, you know, playing a ditch. there's a whole lot more to that. Did I answer the question? I forgot the question.
You did answer it. It was about, you did. That was fantastic.
So that's what So it's more than this intellectual way. You can't intellectualize it. You have to sense it and feel it, and I think that's what human beings should do more. It doesn't matter whether you're black or white, even, because have non-Aboriginal people come in and sense that and feel that sense of belonging and acceptance, and that's what communities need to do more. And it's not a show. It's feeling and respect. And if you can't recognise a person for being a person who they are and respect them, well, you can't do anything else. You got to accept people how they present, and then if they're wounded in any way, then you have to understand that and engage with people. Using, I don't know what language that is, engage, but to work with someone, or you want to be their friend or socialise. And I think that's the basis of what any society needs, is a basis for cultural and culture is it's about ceremony and ceremony is about you doing things for people to relax and feel part of that. You got to feel part of it, otherwise, I don't think things work as well.
I'm just watching the time, and I know we're running out of time, but I want to ask you one final question, and that is, what would you like people to walk away with from our yarn this afternoon?
I'd like people to, take that on board, I guess, is to, to respect each other and try to understand people more. And, a lot of people are wounded, and just to respect people. And you don't have to be that big helper or anything, but just to understand people and recognise them, to recognise someone and respect them. I think that goes a long way. Recognition and respect are such important words, because that's also part of a ceremonial thing. That's what it's about.
So I want to thank you for hanging with us this afternoon.
Thank you.
You know how much I really love you.
And I love you back.
And that we always have a bit of a chat on Messenger when we can't actually get together.
Yes. Thank you, AJ. And can I just say that I think you've done amazing work, and I follow you, and I see and hear what you do, and I think, and we need more people like you to have that heart to do that work for our people, because it is so needed, and too many people miss the mark, and too many people are even more wounded because of that. So thank you too.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. And I'll see you guys in the next podcast. So thanks to Aunty Marge. Bye.
See ya.